All right. I guess I could say I'm excited to be here with my Commonwealth brother, considering I'm from Canada and you're from the UK. Welcome, Roy.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
No, I really appreciate you being our guest on our Leaders Who Care series, and I think our audience will figure out why. We do recognize you as a leader who cares, and a great way to start, as always, would be if you can briefly introduce yourself, family, where you're from, whatnot. We'll get into the business in a little bit, but share everybody a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Well, I'm in England at the moment, in sunny, relatively sunny English countryside. I was born in South Africa in 69 years ago, unfortunately, just turned 69. But we emigrated in 1960 from South Africa because my parents couldn't stand the politics there, and they didn't want to bring 4 kids up in a country full of the kind of apartheid and what was going on. And we emigrated to an island called Jersey in the Channel Islands. A lot of Americans know New Jersey, but this was the original Jersey where the Jersey cows come from. And we did that because my mother heard that it was a tropical island with palm trees off the coast of England. And yeah, there are 4 palm trees there, but they're all dead, and they were dead then, they're dead now. But it's a nice island. It was a great place for a kid to grow up. And then by 67, 2 of the kids had moved to London, and my parents said, well, we didn't travel 6,000 miles to split the family. So we moved to London. So as a 14-year-old, well, just before that, in Jersey, as a small island with 60,000 population, the problem for me was great school, was great upbringing, but there were no Jews in the island. And we were the only 2 Jews in the school, was my brother and I. And the anti-Semitism was unbelievable. And so we'd gone from the apartheid to being the aggressors as such, to being the subjects of anti-Semitism. And I used to get beaten up at school literally every term by some kids there which were pretty mean. But we left in 1967 and came to England. And that was a great time to be in London. We were literally in the middle of London, Carnaby Street, floral trousers, pink chiffon scarf, and great times. On the bus, I would go past Abbey Road every day. I would come down Baker Street where the Beatles offices were, the Apple offices. I went to Led Zeppelin concerts, free Rolling Stone concerts in my back garden, which was the park, Hyde Park. Wow. So it was a hell of a time to grow up as a 14-year-old in England. But academically, I was always pretty challenged, and it transpired later that it was probably dyslexia. I don't think I was ever diagnosed, but I think it was. And the reality of it was I got kept down at school for a year in Jersey. I used to get beaten every year, every term at school, but not just by the anti-Semites, but by the teachers, because if you did anything wrong, you got 6 of the best. And so the upbringing there was kind of strange. Yeah. But being a 19-year-old now leaving school, i.e. because I was kept down, having failed everything except for economics, which I got a grade E on, which is just a pass. But I spoke fluent French, and I failed that because with dyslexia, I couldn't pass the grammar. The dictation, I got 0 out of 20. So that was, from an academic point of view, there was nowhere to go. All my friends were going to university. I couldn't even get into university, no one choose one. And at the age of 19, that started today you call it a portfolio career, but I had 29 jobs in the next 6 years. So literally, I did everything from a barman to driving a van to door-to-door insurance, and to running. I was a manager in a restaurant chain in London at the age of 19 called GAD, Great American Disaster. It was the precursor to Hard Rock. The guy left there to form Hard Rock, which was just down the road, the first one in Park Lane, the Hard Rock Cafe. Peter Morton, I think his name was. Yeah. So GAD, they had 3 in London. I eventually got fired from that, within 6 months, basically because I fired the chef for smoking in the kitchen, but he wasn't smoking. He was smoking a joint in the kitchen. And they fired me because I think he was running their drug ring. So colorful youth. But for me, that was my university. That's what I called the UOL, University of Life. And during that journey, I made huge contacts. I learned a lot. I was in different industries, mainly around the food and catering industry. My father had started a drive-in restaurant in Jersey, which was the first drive-in restaurant in Europe in 1961. And the trays were imported from Chicago, Illinois. And I know that because I cleaned those, hundreds of them. And on the back of each one was stamped Chicago, Illinois. So I got to know where Chicago was. My first thing after leaving school was, so you're interested in catering, we'll go and run the drive-in, because he had a tenant by then and he couldn't let it. And that taught me, I didn't want to be in catering because it was so hard. So I went into hotels and I became night manager in a hotel in London, a 90 bedroom hotel. And then I realized that if the chef walked out or something, or staff problems, you had guests who were booked in. So, you know, restaurants were great because, I mean, one of the times with a restaurant, the chef did walk out and I ended up on the grill in GAD, doing it while everything was going on. And so the hotel was even worse because you couldn't shut the doors. You had guests booked in. So I decided to get into the supply side. And the last job I had was actually I was a non-dairy cream salesman for a firm of butchers. So everybody else they had a cow on their business card because they were in the meat business. I had a bull because I thought it was wrong to put a cow on my business card. I was doing non-dairy cream. And that job was the job that I got fired from last, mainly because it was a big life lesson, because I had a terrible salary. It was £40 a week, but I had a 10 pence per gallon bonus scheme, which was commission. And the owner, the chairman, thought I would go and sell a gallon to this restaurant and a gallon to that restaurant and 3 there. And as soon as I started, I went to British Airways and sold them 400 gallons a week. And then I went to Kenco Coffee and they were going to buy 2,000 gallons a week in jiggers. And then I went to some restaurant groups and pub groups. So suddenly I was earning more than the chairman. And he didn't like that.
Yes.
So he fired me and they went bust.
Exactly.
And it was a great lesson, is don't cap your salespeople.
Never.
But
yeah, it's funny. The best CEOs that I've always known want their salespeople to make more money than them.
Sure.
It's not rocket science.
No, they have the equity, but this guy didn't get it.
Well, that's ego. That's ego and control and all those things. Yeah.
Oh, he was so, you know, he used to make me sign his expense forms. We'd go out for lunch or something with a client. I would have to pay, or no, yeah, I'd pay, and he'd sign my expense form because he was too duplicitous to get the expense form through, because he'd be called to task by the board or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
So, age of 25, I got fired. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say it's fascinating because I remember you posting about after 29 jobs, you were great at interviews, but not great at the job type of deal.
Totally. I was really, obviously, to get 29 jobs in that time, I was, one of which was a kibbutz in Israel, so it's not strictly a job. But yeah, I was good at those interviews, but no, it was hard. But what I did find out was that you got to gravitate towards the people you like, and you work with the people you like and trust. And in that last job, when they fired me, the chairman, not the chairman, the managing director said, "Look, Roy, I've been told to fire you. That's stupid, but I will make it up to you. I promise you," because he'd employed me. And he said, because just at that time, I was starting my first business, which was an airline catering business. And he said, "My Rolodex is yours. I'll help you." And he was a brilliant guy who is named John Harwood. to this day, we're still friends. I'm seeing him tomorrow, in fact. And if he said, lie down in the streets, Roy, there's no traffic coming, I'd believe him. And so John proceeded, as I started my first business, Portions it was called, with two men, myself and a partner, and 4,800 pounds of the savings that I'd made in those 29 jobs. Started this business in airline catering, and John introduced me to the British Airways and the catering companies and all of those so that I could actually grow the business. And we started doing pineapple juice for Iran Air because nobody else would do it. And that grew to doing 1 million cups of juice a week. We sliced all the lemons that went onto British Airways and the gin and tonics for 25 years. And I started slicing them by hand with my partner, Gary, and counting them and putting them into little pots. So that business doubled and trebled in size over that period. It went from literally the 2 people to 600 people in 4 countries. So London, Paris, Amsterdam, and in the US in Allentown, we had a warehousing operation. And as we grew to that, the world went through what I call the seven plagues. We in the airline industry, we had 9/11 and global economic downturn and foot and mouth disease and avian bird flu and et cetera, et cetera. And each time I built the business up, whoosh, down 40%. Even when 9/11 happened, before the second Twin Tower got hit, I had to cancel the pipeline of goods coming in from the US because we were shipping food around the Europe for American Airlines, US Airlines. So it was just a nightmare. And that's when I decided to outsource all the manufacturing. And I got down to 140 people. And then I met Delta Airlines and they said, it's crazy. One day we need one company doing our food distribution, one doing our equipment. We need one company. Go and see these guys in Zurich. And I went and saw them. And they were doing all of this distribution. And they didn't have a warehouse and they didn't have a truck. There were 6 guys in a room in a office with a big IBM 34 computer. And so I went back to my board. I said, why have we got trucks? Why have we got 50,000 square foot freezer warehouses? Let's see if we can outsource this. So we did, and we got down to some 40 people, 60 people. And then airlines were saying, well, are you a logistics provider, BPO, business process outsourcer, or are you making beautiful double choc muffins? And so the guys who were doing all the product development, I started a new business with them called Portfolio Partners, and they became a broker. And 20 of them left to set that up, and that left us with 40 people. And at that time, we were supplying our customers with a printed catalog with all of our products. And these were little Polaroid photos of an orange segment or beef Wellington or a sandwich. And they had to be updated. They had to be shipped to 80 customers around the world, in Qantas in Australia, American Airlines in Arlington. And it was just crazy. And I had the idea, if we could put all of that onto a floppy disk, and I know you'll remember that. If we could put all of that onto a floppy disk and then get those to the customers, then we wouldn't have this problem. But the problem with that was they weren't allowed to put outside programs in an airline like American Airlines or British Airways. The IT department would never let them do that. So I got each of my suppliers to pay £1,500 to be on that floppy disk. And my suppliers were Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, etc. And then they were on the disk with their products. And with that money, I bought 80 Acer computers, these big green square blocks. And I shipped them to Australia, to America, to everywhere in the world. And that was phone-to-phone protocol. You know,
yeah.
You dial up, and they'd put their floppy disk in, and they would be able to look at, they'd have the latest ones, but they'd also be able to order from us and place their daily orders. So instead of sending us faxes, now we had electronic ordering, and the product ended up being called ECOPS, electronic catalog order processing system. And it was just as internet was coming in, but nobody would let it in their building. We had the first catalog. The great thing about this catalog was if you didn't pay me, you weren't on it.
That's a brilliant precursor to the internet. And I remember clients actually telling me when the internet came out, well, I don't know what this website and the internet thing is all about. We're doing fine. We don't need something like that. And without even, being open enough to see what could happen. And it seems to me that like the way you call it, the university, experience, not being in university, what would you say your biggest learning experience was from all that? Was it that don't let someone restrict your imagination or vision? Was it your people skills? What do you think it was?
I think entrepreneurs are ignorant of risk, and that's a great skill to have. They're optimistic, it's always going to be okay, etc. It's also, valuing yourself and what you do, understanding the value of that. And today I talk about the value of legacy in what I do now, but understanding the value of that. And every time I've sold a business, and I've sold 7 or 8, it wasn't based on an accountant's valuation of the business. It was based on what I thought the person who was going to buy it needed it for. And I once sold a business that didn't exist, and it wasn't a crooked thing. It was 3 businesses in different countries making fruit salad. And what I did was I created a pro forma business. I said, well, if you pull them all together in one country, you'd have this volume, and then you'd have a business worth this. And it's fresh fruit salad. You couldn't physically do that because you had to make it fresh every day. But the people who bought it, we had £60,000 worth of assets, which were stainless steel tables and knives and stuff. But we had one contract with one supermarket selling fruit salad to one of the big supermarket chains here. And the company that wanted to buy it were making coleslaw and vegetable salads. And they couldn't get into the supermarket. So I sold it to them for £1 million. A business that didn't exist. It only existed on paper, which is £60,000 worth of assets. And the company buying it was delighted because £1 million to get into that market for them was fine. And I think it's that life lesson of, of just making sure that you sell something for the value to the acquirer, not to the accountant's valuation.
Yeah, that's so valuable advice. And I think, in fact, I heard today on the news how so many young people are now making conscious decisions to skip university and just go into business because they see what maybe was obvious, that there are benefits to college, obviously, but will it lead to what they really want to do, and the value of their time to do it.
I think you often see people sitting in a classroom thinking, I'm trying to learn from somebody I don't want to be like, and I don't want that job.
Exactly.
So why should, it's a little bit like with consultants, there's consultants who actually then go in and do the job and actually implement it. The others who write the report.
Right.
Possibly the ones who, it's not their risk, and they can always say you implemented it wrong. And I think it's the same when you're sitting there being taught by someone, and you'll find that with a lot of entrepreneurs leave school early because they're sitting bored listening.
Absolutely.
I sat in on a London Business School presentation where that business portions was a case study, and the professor at the front was telling people what happened and and how we did things and stuff. And some of the students were saying, this guy's an idiot. Why would he do that? I was at the back of the class. Why would he do that? And the point was, they didn't know the context at the time. They didn't know the tax advantages the government were giving to putting money there rather than there, etc. And the guy started, the professor, Rupert Mearson, he started by saying that there'd been an article in the FT that day by saying that anybody who's still listening to me on this course on entrepreneurship is not going to be an entrepreneur. The 4 who are sleeping in this room will be.
They're not just sleeping, they're dreaming. They're
Exactly,
dreaming.
exactly.
So, well, that's good. That's a good segue to there's now you maybe determined there's 2 parts here. There's the legacy and the learning of the value of your time and your experiences. And now, as you're saying, there's we'll move into our life book part of this conversation. There's remembering the legacy and the experiences of so many people by what you're doing. Share with us briefly, to some degree, your interaction with your dad and how that spurred you on to Lifebook.
Sure. Just with the situation with my father was that he was blind and towards the end of his life and pretty depressed. And my mother was in the same care home. He had a little apartment there. She was in nursing care and she was dying. Both of them smoked 60 cigarettes a day as I grew up. So my breathing is a little bit compromised. And they were in their mid 80s and drank a little bit, brandy and soda every day, but they went well. And my dad was just depressed about it. And I tried to find a project, something that he would cheer him up, that he would look at. And the turning point for me was really when I took him out for lunch. He complained throughout the lunch about the money I was spending, and the price of the wine was 24 quid. You kids don't know the value of anything anymore. And 3 times he started stories, and 3 times I said, Dad, I've heard that before. And I just shut him down. And I left and I turned to say goodbye when I took him back to his room, and I said, don't worry. And I stopped myself because I was going to say, don't worry, it'll be better next week. And I knew it wouldn't. I knew it'd be worse. Mm-hmm. So I got Kathy, who was my PA, to go and visit him each week. I drove back to my office, and on the way around, I thought, I've got to come up with this project. And I got Kathy to actually go and visit him on the pretext of wanting the story, but I didn't. Just to interview him and not shut him down and ask him what happened next and how did you feel about that. And he passed away too soon, I got 35 pages out of him. And the reality was that having got that text, I just put it in a drawer. It was a pre-computer time, so it was typed on a typewriter, and I put it in a drawer. Today, it's published privately for me, and that's my father's book, Life is for Sharing. And the thing about it today is that there are stories in there I wish I could ask him about, which he'd never told me. But my favorite one, I told you before, of the King of Poland, where our ancestor was around when the king died and they didn't want to be without a king. So they found a commoner without any issue, without children, made him King of Poland for one night. And so they could hand the crown on the next day. And that's the first story in his book. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. So that was the precursor. And then I parked it. And then when having sold portions and living a nice life for a while, I thought I needed to do something which was a bit more purposeful. Having taken up polo, which was not really got much purpose, except it's great fun.
Yeah.
So I tried to find a way to take that airline logistics thinking of, a program and a formula to actually make something happen, but try and do something which was on the front end, a human doing what Kathy was doing with my dad. Went to Bakerest in Toronto, talked to them about slowing down cognitive decline in elder adults and seeing how you could actually have that effect, and then gather that legacy. And seeing the effect it had on people to actually see their book in print, to have a title, these titles behind me, they're crazy with people, they come up fantastic. But to actually have all of that information in a legacy and have that self-worth and the difference it made to people. And today, because we've been doing it for quite a while, we're even getting stories where people they're becoming demented, they're starting to lose their memory. They're reading their book and they're reading it like it's fresh. They're finding the memories.
It's amazing.
I had one yesterday who just said, thank you, thank you, thank you, 3 times, because my brain was empty. And now they'd asked a question, the daughter showed them in the book where it was, where they'd met their wife, and they could enjoy that memory again themselves. I didn't do it for them. I did it for the kids.
Yeah. You know, one thing I found just amazing, and the good fortune to have met you and engaged together is I understood the importance and value of documenting and having those stories, those experiences for people to read, for the family to cherish, to have, but even for other people to read and know about. And with COVID and everything that's going on, I think it brought an awareness of people even more so what's important in our life. However, the thing I didn't expect, which I was so amazed by, since we do a lot in well-being and mental health, is that spark in the eye, that trigger of having purpose, that excitement of remembering their own stories that you talked about. Yeah. That you know, to quote MasterCard, is priceless.
I was worried. I did a number of radio interviews with a woman we employ as a psychiatric gerontologist, and she's a neuroscientist. And I was worried about, so we have this project, it lasts 3, 4, 5 months. Somebody comes and visits you every week, interviews your mother, father, you in your home, and you're looking forward to it. Some of our clients get their hair done before their interviewer comes, etc. And you've got all this, and then it stops. The book's finished and the project's completed. And I thought, well, what then? How do you deal with that? And what Linda said on these radio shows, she said, Roy, typically people, when they're aging, they're going downhill in whatever way. They're losing control, mental, physical, financial control, and they're deteriorating. They're isolated. People are not talking to them. They're not interested. So they're sort of going down like this. So what you've done by writing their book is you've taken them up there, and you've given them self-worth, and you've given them a legacy they can be proud of. And now they'll start aging and going down, but they're starting from a higher place. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, no, and so do I. And I think there's so much value to it, especially, as I said, for learning, for kids to read stories about not only their ancestry, but talking to other kids about it. I mean, show and tell of the kid bringing their great grandfather's book or whatever to a place. It's beautiful.
So we have a team of 7 behind each project. So there's project manager, interviewer, ghostwriter, editor, typesetter, proofreader, and then it gets printed. And gets printed. They're handmade in a bindery here, and they're sewn and everything. So it's a beautiful end product, because the customers were saying, initially our books were pretty sort of cheap and they were PPC bound, but they were saying, this is the best book on my bookshelf. I wanted to feel like that. And so for Lifebook, it was really key that we had that team there. But that team, so every day we have a daily call, and as the books come in, and you can see there's a pile on the floor there which need a bookshelf. We're building new bookshelves here. But as they come in, we do a show and tell. So the project manager who did that book, and they tell us the story. They've been working on it for 6 months, but they tell us the story, which is always different, amazing, some really big, important people, some very normal people, but all with a family who they want to leave a legacy for. And in America, the company's called Lifetime Memoirs, and here Lifebook UK. But both of them have got clients who are doing completely different things. Some of them are arguing about which picture of their yacht to put in there. And some of them, are just, now I can't show you those books because they're all private. I was going to show you one, but I love, there was an English woman, just her title here is Could Be of Interest. It's like so unassuming.
Well, I interviewed a fellow, a very, very senior, brilliant guy. And he said to me, we all seem to have to go somewhere else to find the best speaker, or somewhere else to get the best experience. Maybe you should just ask the cashier at your drugstore, what's her story? And I'll bet you she's got one.
Yeah, or the postman, or yeah.
Great.
No, that's a brilliant thing to say. There are 2 quotes which I love. One is, it's an African proverb which says, when an elder person passes on, a whole library burns down. because those memories are gone. David Brooks talks about resume virtues and eulogy virtues, and the different ones. And the resume ones are the things, as you know only too well, you can Google, you'll be able to find forever. But you talk about anybody born sort of I don't know, 1960, there's very little you can Google on them. And the eulogy virtues are the one that normally we don't hear because we're in the box. But they're the nice things and not so nice things that people might say about you. But those are the ones that it'd be good to know before you popped off.
Well, you know, when we started working with you, and I know you know this, but just to share with everybody, almost every individual we spoke to said, man, I wish I would have done that with my dad or my grandfather. And I actually have cassettes and stuff. My grandfather was from Kyiv, and he told stories, and we were fortunate enough to have a brain to record some of them when he told us. And you know, you can, it's just maybe the deepest heartfelt feeling you can have to keep that alive.
Yeah. And the fascinating thing is, you said that you've got cassettes, and by the way, we do need to type those out and get those into a book, but you've got cassettes. That medium changes all the time. One of our printers is on his website. If you want to read the Magna Carta from 1066, you can go, 1086, you can turn the pages with white gloves and you can read it. If you want to read a floppy disk from 1996, you can't.
It's a great point.
and a printed book, you know, that folds flat, that's sewn, that'll last 400 years, is forever.
Plus, there is something, obviously there's pros and cons video in this stuff, but there's something about holding that book in your hand that there's an energy, there's something there.
And you see a 12-year-old kid, we've got a photo of one in America, he was given it by his grandmother, and he's got Nike shorts, he's got an Adidas hoodie up like this, no shoes on, he's sitting on a sofa leafing through this book and going, wow, that's amazing, that's amazing. Now, if it was on a Kindle or whatever, his attention span would have been limited. And one of the key messages of that is that you can't ensure your memory. We're all going to lose that at some stage in some way, but you can ensure your memories if you write them down.
And there is triggers, and you've seen this with music too, when someone who's lost mostly all their memory and they start remembering a song, or they start playing the piano, or they start reading a story, as you said, it does trigger. And that, even if it's for moments, and it's generally for longer, it's a way to bring back joy.
Yeah. I mean, the last thing we do in our project is we actually get the client to read out from their book their favorite stories, or just tell them, because you get the laughter and emotion there. And we do it's got on the shelf over there, we do a 1-hour USB with your granddad's stories on there in his voice, because that is priceless, to have that voice forever.
Yeah, it definitely is. Little switch. One last question in this segment I wanted to ask you is, we deal with a lot of corporates, a lot of business people and whatnot. They're always looking for ways to show that they really do care about their employees. That's literally where Leaders Who Care came from. How do you, if you care about your employees, you'll attract and keep and develop them better. What's the possibilities that leaders of companies can offer the life books as rewards or special benefits for their employees to use in their families?
I've always thought that, when somebody retires, it's a big moment for them, and it's a scary moment, because they go from having a secretary or being in, having a photocopy or whatever it is, to being at home and now treating the spouse as their employees. And that first 6 months or 12 months is a huge gap in their lives.
Yeah.
And I thought, if people would give as a retirement gift a lifetime memoir, which means that this person's going to talk about the company as well that's given them this gift, rather than a watch or something, but they're actually going to recount their working life and their time to now. Somebody's going to come and visit them each week for the next 6 months. So they're actually doing something, having a project, looking for the photos, doing that, and slowing down. And then at the end of it, get on with the other half of your life.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because you're right. There is a gap, more so for men even at this point than women. but that'll change with more women working. But there is like,
Yeah.
holy cow, now what do I do type of scenario, and am I really as valuable as I thought, type of thing.
Yeah, when people don't answer your calls anymore because you can't do anything. No.
Yeah, that's really sad part too, actually.
Yeah, I think when they get to reread their book and when they hear their children or grandchildren, because quite often, the children don't want to hear about, they've lived your business life, your work life. They don't want to hear about it anymore. But it's the time when the memories are there and somebody will drag it out of them and get it there forever. And they can be proud of stuff. They can be proud of where they've come from and what they've done. And
it should be. And the most amazing stories also come from the not famous, not celeb, not known people that have done amazing things. And I think it's spectacular. And we're telling everybody about it because they need to know about it. One last thing I want to ask you on this part is, with everything that's happened over the last few years and whatnot, what are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Oh, I'm most grateful, certainly within the last 2 or 3 years of COVID and everything that's brought to us, is I built a business. We have by then we only had about 15 staff. We grew it during COVID to 30 staff, 29 we are now at. And we were able to pivot. We were able to get them all working at home. We didn't furlough anyone. We grew the company because people were stuck at home and they were lonely and they were, doing your memoirs when you're worried about your mortality and you're not going on a cruise anymore or whatever, and you're worried about longevity was important. What I'm grateful about is the fact that all of these people, we kept them together as a team. A lot of them are young, and the mental health issues that surround that are horrendous. Now, we see it in the loneliness of our clients. But when you see the light on the faces of these guys who are producing their life stories and memoirs, who are telling those stories, who are, all these staff that we have who are under 30, they see the black and white photographs in these books. They see a man in a one-piece swimming costume, on the beach. It's a whole new world to them that they haven't seen before. So they're getting an education by sort of osmosis.
Absolutely.
Our staff are, they're all sort of pretty educated to be able to do the kind of editing and project management work we do. But it's not about education. It's about an understanding of that time period.
And what are you most hopeful for?
I'm scared, to tell you the truth, in terms of hopeful with what's going on in the world at the moment. And Yvette and I, we chose not to have children because we were worried about Vietnam and grass, drugs and war. Today's so much worse than that. And it's not a very optimistic note to leave on. I've been involved in some ways with homeless charities, with a few things to do with what's going on in Ukraine. And what I'm most hopeful for and optimistic about is the number of good people that are there doing stuff. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. And when we doing the homeless charities and you're standing there with a bunch of volunteers and you turn around to the next guy and he's a banker or he's a Coldstream guard or he's a delivery driver. There was one guy who was a JP Morgan banker, and he was giving his time and in a dangerous place and way. So there's optimism in that respect. There's a lot of good people come together. As long as the evil that's going on is not ignored by silence.
Yeah, that's it's a sad and hopeful way to end this part of the interview. And but I agree. I still have to believe there are way more good people than evil people. And So it's got to give you hope to some degree in that. But
I
hey,
think
listen,
there are
go ahead.
What's going on at the moment as what happened sort of 70, 80 years ago, one bad person or one very bad person. And we've got to learn from that as to not have bad people able to be in power. Now, that's easier said than done, but it's a reality. We thought the world had balanced itself, and NATO and things like this would, United Nations, would enable us to avoid this sort of thing, and it hasn't. So let's hope we are learning from that.
Let's hope, and not short memories either. So
write it down.
To write it down and shout it out is what is also. But yeah, let's definitely hope for that. And thank you for all you do. Thank you for sharing Lifebook. I think it's an amazing service and an honor for a lot of people to have. And thank you for what you've done with Ukraine as well, you and Yvonne. It's great. And
Yvette, don't get that wrong.
What's that?
Yvette, not Yvonne.
Yvette, sorry, Yvette.
It's all right. She was going to be christened Yvonne, and her parents changed it because her surname's Con, so Yvonne Con didn't work. So you were right.
Well, okay, there you go. So and thank you for being a leader who cares.
I appreciate it, and it's been great working with you, and it's how we discovered each other. So no, let's keep it up.
You bet. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Take care.